Once upon a time in a land far, far away, there was a sea unlike any other. It was called the Dead Sea, and it was so salty that nothing could live in its waters. But this story isn't about the sea itself. It's about something incredible that was found near its shores. Something that would change the way we understand history. Our tale begins on a sunny day in 1947. A young Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad was tending his flock of goats near the Dead Sea. As he walked along the rocky cliffs, he noticed something strange, a small opening in the side of a hill. Curious, he tossed a stone into the opening, hoping to scare away any animals that might be hiding inside. But instead of hearing the scurrying of little feet, he heard something else, the sound of pottery breaking. Intrigued, Muhammad decided to investigate. He climbed into the cave, and what he found inside would soon become one of the greatest discoveries of all time. There in the darkness of the cave were old clay jars, and inside these jars were scrolls, ancient pieces of writing that had been hidden away for thousands of years. Muhammad didn't know it yet, but he had just stumbled upon the first of what we now call the Dead Sea Scrolls. News of Muhammad's discovery spread quickly. Soon more people came to search the area. They found not just one cave, but 11. Each cave held more scrolls and fragments of scrolls. It was like a giant puzzle waiting to be solved. For the next 9 years, from 1947 to 1956, explorers and archaeologists searched these caves. They carefully collected over 15,000 pieces of ancient writing. Some were as big as entire books, while others were tiny fragments, no bigger than a fingernail. Imagine if you could send a message to people living thousands of years in the future. That's kind of what the Dead Sea Scrolls are like, a time capsule from the past. These scrolls are incredibly old. The oldest ones were written about 2,200 years ago, and the newest ones are about 1,900 years old. Most of the scrolls were written in Hebrew, the language of ancient Israel, but some were in Aramaic, and a few were even in Greek. It's like finding a treasure chest filled with different languages. Now you might be wondering, what's written on these old scrolls? Well, they contain all sorts of interesting things. Many of the scrolls have parts of the Hebrew Bible, which Christians call the Old Testament. In fact, they found pieces of every book in the Hebrew Bible except for one, the Book of Esther. It's like finding the world's oldest library of religious texts. But that's not all. The scrolls also included other writings that weren't part of the Bible. Some told stories about biblical heroes like Abraham and Enoch. Others had rules for how a community should live. There were even scrolls that talked about a great battle between good and evil that would happen in the future. One of the most exciting finds was a complete scroll of the book of Isaiah. This scroll is special because it's about 1,000 years older than any other copy of Isaiah that we had before. It's like finding a first edition of a very, very old book. Among all the scrolls, one stands out as extra special, the copper scroll. Unlike the others written on animal skin or papyrus, this one was made of copper. It's like an ancient treasure map, listing hidden gold and silver. To this day, no one has found the treasure it describes. Maybe it's still out there waiting to be discovered. Now here's a mystery for you. Who wrote all these scrolls? Many scientists think they were written by a group of people called the Essenes. The Essenes were a Jewish group who lived apart from others and followed strict rules. Near where the scrolls were found, there are ruins of an ancient settlement called Qumran. Many people think this is where the Essenes lived and where they wrote and copied the scrolls. But why were the scrolls hidden in caves? Well, about 2,000 years ago, the Roman army was attacking the land where the Essenes lived. The Essenes might have hidden their precious scrolls in the caves to keep them safe from the Romans. It's like they were playing a giant game of hide and seek with their most valuable possessions, hoping that someday someone would find them and learn from their wisdom. For nearly 2,000 years, the scrolls lay hidden in their desert caves. The dry air of the desert helped preserve them. It's almost as if the scrolls were sleeping, waiting for the right time to wake up and share their secrets with the world. When the scrolls were finally discovered, it was like waking them up from a very long nap. But these ancient documents were very fragile. Some would crumble if you touched them. Scientists had to be extremely careful when handling them. They used special cameras to take pictures of the scrolls without touching them. They also used infrared light, which can show writing that's invisible to our eyes. It was like using magic to reveal hidden messages. Today, most of the Dead Sea Scrolls have a special home. They live in a place called the Shrine of the Book, which is part of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The building looks like a giant white dome, kind of like the lid of the jars the scrolls were found in. Inside, the scrolls are kept in special conditions to make sure they don't get damaged. It's like they're tucked into bed, safe and sound, but still able to share their stories with visitors from all around the world. The Dead Sea Scrolls are like a window into the past. They help us understand what life was like for Jewish people about 2,000 years ago. They show us how their religious ideas developed and changed over time. The scrolls also give us clues about the beginnings of Christianity. Remember, Jesus lived around the same time that some of these scrolls were written. By studying the scrolls, we can better understand the world Jesus lived in. Even though the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered over 70 years ago, scientists are still studying them today. It's like a story that never ends. There's always something new to learn. With new technology, researchers can look at the scrolls in ways they couldn't before. They can read parts that were too faded to see in the past. They can even figure out what kind of animals the parchment was made from. The Dead Sea Scrolls have been called the greatest manuscript discovery of modern times. That's a fancy way of saying they're really, really important. They've changed the way we understand the history of Judaism and the background of Christianity. But more than that, the scrolls remind us of the power of the written word. These ancient texts survived for thousands of years, waiting patiently in their desert hideaway. Now they continue to speak to us, sharing their wisdom across the centuries. And so our story of the Dead Sea Scrolls comes to an end. Or does it? In many ways, the adventure is just beginning. Every day, researchers are learning new things from these ancient texts. Who knows what secrets they might reveal next? Maybe someday, you'll be the one to uncover a new mystery hidden in the words of the Dead Sea Scrolls. In a way, finding the Dead Sea Scrolls was like finding a message in a bottle, a message from people who lived thousands of years ago. These scrolls traveled through time to reach us, carrying the thoughts, beliefs, and stories of ancient people. They remind us that even though the world has changed a lot in 2,000 years, people from long ago weren't so different from us. They too had hopes and fears. They wrote down their ideas and they wanted to preserve their knowledge for the future. The story of the Dead Sea Scrolls teaches us that sometimes the greatest treasures are not gold or jewels, but words written on fragile scrolls. It shows us that with curiosity, careful study, and a bit of luck, we can unlock the secrets of the past. So the next time you see an old book or an ancient artifact, remember the Dead Sea Scrolls. Who knows what amazing discoveries might be waiting for you to find them? After all, every great adventure, like the story of the Dead Sea Scrolls, begins with a single curious step into the unknown. And there you have it, the incredible tale of the Dead Sea Scrolls, a story of shepherds and scholars, of ancient wisdom and modern discovery, of a treasure hidden for centuries and now shared with the world. It's a reminder that history isn't just something that happened long ago. It's a living story that we're still uncovering, one scroll at a time.